everyone, welcome to our bonus episode on Eve Elliott.
Eve Elliott.
It's a classic character profile. Is it classic? Is she classic?
Totally. Is she in the past? She's classic. My question is she Evelyn or is she Eve? Because I kind of think she's Eve.
Is she Evelyn?
No, she's not Evelyn. She's definitely not Evelyn. But Corrie have her listed down as Evelyn Elliott. But I think she mostly went by it. I think kind of Evelyn. It's because maybe did Fred always call her that? Because she was married to Fred Elliott, of course, hence the surname. And he always used to have a thing for calling people by their full names, didn't he? Much like Jim McDonald. So he might have called her Evelyn. I think everyone else called her Eve. So we'll see how we go as the episode goes on. Now this was a request. We do take requests sometimes from Lisa on YouTube, who has been asking for us to do a character profile. Yeah. Said that a bit weird there. For a couple of weeks. So I thought, why not? Let's have a look at her.
Asking us to do a character profile on her specifically.
Yes, exactly.
Because asking us to do a character profile in general was like, we do that already.
I wasn't going to do her because she's not been necessarily a main character over the years. So I'm thinking this isn't going to be a long kind of podcast. But, back in the day, we probably did Fred Elliott in about 10-15 minutes back in the early days, and I think that Evelyn's definitely going to go a bit longer than that, despite being significantly less popular. But we'll see what we can eke out of this.
Let's not be just.
I'm just killing time now.
Lisa has asked us to do this.
We're going to do it justice,
she likes
Lisa.
This character.
I think that's right. So she is kind of fresh in my memory at the moment because Eve, we're in 2002 in Classic Coronation Street on ITV3 at the moment, and it's not been long since Eve has left, so it kind of makes sense to take the opportunity to look back over her time. So it's fairly fresh in my memory. Although of course you've not been watching this, have you? And you're not too you're not too much of an Eve buff, are you?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know very much about her. I do know everything there is to know now because I read the notes.
Of course. Well, I mean, you must have watched her at the time because she came in.
Look. No. What do you mean?
You started watching Coronation Street in 2001, didn't you? That's true. I made you start watching in 2001, and that was prime Eve time.
Was it? Okay.
It was.
I don't remember very much about.
No, well, exactly, and we obviously watched the DVDs for the first 60 years, just the last couple of years, so we would have seen her in that. But she didn't have mega huge storylines, and it's understandable if she kind of went under the radar a bit. So I'm hoping that you might learn a little bit from this as well, Gemma. But what you got to do is pretend you know it all and act like the expert and like read the notes out like you just.
I do that all the time.
Doing it off the top of your head, like you ad-libbing it all. Tell you what, Gemma, let me test you on your Eve Elliott knowledge by asking you to run down her vital statistics.
No, ask me questions and I'll answer them.
Who was she married to?
She was married to Ray Sykes and then Fred Elliott, but that was bigamist.
It was. And did she have any children, Gemma,
did.
just off the top of your head?
She did.
Who, may I ask?
One of them was called Linda Baldwin.
Yes.
One of them was called Jimmy Sykes. And then there was another one called Ryan Sykes. Mm-hmm. And then there was another one called Dean Sykes. And then there was another one.
There was another one who was called, I don't know, something Sykes. Now, Dean Sykes was played by, and I should have written this down, I don't know why I didn't, but it's the guy who plays Damon at the moment on Coronation Street.
Really?
Yes, indeed. Dean Sykes with Damon. Mm. Yeah. He looked a lot less macho back in the day when he was in it back in 2001 or 2000. But yeah, he was very, very much babyface. But yes, we still got a Sykes on Coronation Street as it is at the moment. Now back to her stats, Gemma.
But he's not the same character.
No, he's not because Dean Sykes is dead.
I know, but don't say we've got a Sykes still on the show because we don't.
No, we do not have a Sykes. When did Evelyn make her first appearance on Coronation Street?
I reckon, I'm going to say, it was the 20th.
Yeah, the 20th of October.
2000. Mm-hmm. And last appeared probably the 10th of May, 2002. Which, I think if I add it up, was 117 appearances.
It is well done, yeah. Who played her?
Melanie Kilburn.
There we go. Look, Gemma is an expert on Eve Sykes. Perfect. Mm-hmm. So yeah,
does the joke only work if you?
I don't think we can keep this going. Don't think this can keep going all the way through. I think people are going to be switching off in their drones about this. Apart from Lisa, hopefully,
switching off in their drones.
Yeah. So Melanie Kilburn, she trained at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama.
Wow.
And I know, I'm spitting out facts tonight. She first appeared on telly in 1983 in the movie The Last Company Car, and she's got quite a good old IMDb listing. Does Melanie? She made loads of appearances on telly shows in the 80s and 90s, mostly one-offs.
Yeah.
But also she was a regular in shows like Where the Heart Is for a bit, another show called Making Out. But really, Coronation Street was her first extended role on television. Yeah, it's
role.
what she's most famous for, one might say. Although she has been in some other things recently. She's been just in EastEnders, would you believe? Just last Christmas she was in EastEnders.
Traitor.
She was playing a vicar. I think I've got a bit more information about that later. So Eve, basically. The story is because we think we did Linda Baldwin as a character profile just last year, if I remember rightly. So we might remember some of this might come back to you.
So Linda Baldwin's her daughter.
Yes. So she had a really difficult relationship with her family. Eve did. So she basically abandoned them in the 80s, and it's partly because her husband Ray was always in and out of prison, and he was just like not a very nice guy, to be honest. Eve felt totally unappreciated by him. She had a house full of boys. She couldn't cope with it. So in the end, in the 80s, she walked out on them, which left Linda to bring up Dean and Ryan and all the other little cyclings.
Psychos, they call
by the late 90s, though, Linda had also given up on them. So they were a bit of a lost cause. The Sykes were like they were the
Chavvy ones.
They were the Hayes, I might say, which is quite good that.
They were like the
like Jacob and Damon, which is quite good that he's still
like the Windassers.
Yeah, exactly. The Windassers of the late 90s, early 2000s.
A family that everyone on the street can look down upon.
This was them, the dodgy gangster criminal family, and and Eve was the mum, but. I know she had a rough streak to her, to be sure, but I think
so did Linda.
Yeah,
Linda was actually scary.
She could
be. Looked like she'd cut your face.
See, when I think back to Eve, whatever we're going to call her, before I rewatched her in these recent episodes on ITV3, she was absolutely no more than a blip on my Corrie radar. But I actually grew to quite like her a little bit, and she's one of these characters a bit like Gwen, who Jim McDonald went out with for a while. That's like, does anybody remember her whatsoever? She made not a single impression on maybe any Coronation Street viewer. But actually, I did change my mind a little bit about Eve, and I have enjoyed rewatching her again. She seemed like could have had the makings of a decent character, and definitely like one of these stern, forceful matriarchs. But she was gone within a year and a half of being on Coronation Street, and so didn't get a chance to blossom.
And you'll find out the shocking reason why later in this podcast.
I am going to pass over to you to tell us what went on in 2000, because she was only in one episode in 2000. It was 2001 where she properly came into it. But remind us, Gemma, what happened to Eve in 2000?
Well, her youngest son, Dean, who's the one...
Oh, I do have his name written down here. Kieran Griffiths. So he's the guy that plays Damon Hay, yeah. Sorry for interruption.
He gets shot.
He's just got a look.
I didn't give you a look then. I smiled at you.
It was a smile.
I am smiling at you because you complain so often in podcasts when I interrupt you.
Yeah.
But you do it to me all the time.
I know.
And nobody can hear you when you do it.
Tell you what, we're like a pair of arguing Sykeses, Gemma, at the moment. When you going to leave me?
I'm not arguing with you.
Okay.
Right, so Dean gets shot and killed by Emma Watts, who's top cop. Weatherfield's finest.
Top shot cop, isn't she?
Yeah, she's like, pew, pew, she gets a gun.
Emma Watts was married to Curly, wasn't she? And there was a story where she wanted to sign up to be in the... I was going to say the firing squad.
The fire brigade, I was going to call it.
What's it called?
We're not used to these things in the
Armed
UK.
Police, SO19
armed
in the
response
bill.
unit.
Yeah, she was in the armed response unit, wasn't she? And Curly was not happy with this. And he was like, what if it's dangerous? What if you get shot? You kill someone else?
No, go for it. It's like being a fireman in the Arctic.
Well, the Fresh Coast...
How often are you going to need to do anything?
Very true, very true. The Fresh Coast Siege was an awesome pair of episodes, wasn't it? Do you remember watching those on the DVD?
Yeah.
It was Fred, it was Mike, it was Ken. It had that scene where Mike and Ken got tied up. Fred and Ashley were there. Alma fancied the security guard.
I need to say, the scene with Mike and Ken, they get tied up together in the stockroom of Fresh Goes, and it is just like watching an episode of Peep Show.
Yeah.
And that's where I decided that they were like basically Mark and what's his face?
Jeremy.
Jez, yeah.
They also didn't they get one of the barbecues out from the frescoes and start cooking themselves up something. And that was a late night episode, wasn't it? And they had a rude word. Do you remember?
They said
they had the SHITE
They
word.
said, "Oh no, shizers."
Oh no, they called it a gob. Shizer.
A gobshizer.
Do you remember?
This is banned on German YouTube now.
Shocking. Okay, yeah. Anyway, so that all ended with the armed response unit bursting in and Emma powing Dean Sykes to death.
And she did it with her gun sideways, like blah blah blah. Take that, like that. She said.
Right.
And she turned her baseball cap round and she was like, "Yeah, check it out, Weatherfield massive."
Anyway.
Evelyn reads about this in the paper and she's like, "Oh no, my son got shot."
I suppose I better go and see the family.
Goes to the funeral, meets up with Linda for the first time in years. It's very tense because Linda, her husband, she at this point was married to Mike Baldwin, as we just said. He was taken hostage, tied to Ken Barlow, and Linda was like, "This is the worst thing that's ever happened to anybody apart from how my brother
Linda's
got shot."
brother tied up her husband in this only on a soap, ladies and gentlemen.
So Linda's blaming Evelyn's disappearance for the way that Dean turned out, which, you know, it's not going to make you less likely to shoot somebody in a supermarket, is it?
He didn't shoot anybody.
Oh no, he got shot.
Just waved a gun.
Yeah. Linda, the pair get the chance to chat properly at the wake, and Linda begins to understand why Eve left all those years ago, and so they leave on civil terms. So I assume it was something like, you know, Dean was always a bit of a massive arse.
Yeah, basically.
And so I can see why you left him.
He wasn't. So he wasn't the main ringleader of the siege, was he? There was the main guy, and Dean was the poor innocent misguided waif who was tagged along there and was I think we've got in over our head here, boss. Kind of thing.
It's not the first or last time. I can't remember if it is the first or last time. What do you mean? There was a gun in a supermarket because Roy took one in when he was on his way to
that was 2002. That was 2 years later. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. See, that could have ended very badly because everyone's on edge after the great Fresco siege of 2000.
Exactly. Although there was also one. Do you remember when there was an arms robbery? When Jim and Andy were working there, and they point the gun at Andy, and Jim's a bit too cowardly or something to jump in there. I think I'm remembering that right. Anyway, we're really kind of just filling time here because there's not a whole lot to say about Eve. But
do you remember that time that there was that lady that was in a bus and it had to go over 50 miles an hour?
Stop it!
And if it went below 50 miles an hour, then it blew up. And I think that was Elsie Tanner's cousin. That happened.
At least my diversions are truthfully Coronation Street related, not just being silly. So 2001 was really Eve's mainstay, what she's remembered for in the show. She appears again April or so she's been away from the show for 5-6 months. They bring her back for a big story to do with Fred Elliott. Who was, I think, one of the owners of the Rovers at the time. I think this is when he bought in with Dougie and Mike. No?
Oh, was it?
I think so.
Okay, but later on he buys it.
Oh, maybe. I don't remember. I don't know what I'm talking about. I apologise for the quality of this podcast
because you're going off piece.
Tonight.
Just read what's written down.
I want to give it a bit of flair.
Stop trying to add loads of details that possibly aren't true.
Fred goes to the Turk's Head pub one day and Evelyn's working there. Get chatting. Fred takes her out. He's got no idea at the time who this is, or indeed that it is the mother of his best mate Mike's wife, Linda. So they go to dinner at Mike and Linda's house one day, and it's a little bit of a surprise to the two of them who Fred's date is. So Linda's there, because she was like the young, floozy bit of stuff of Mike Baldwin, wasn't she? And she was like, "What, Mum, what are you doing going out with Fred?" All a little bit awkward. And also, this is the moment that Fred realises that his date is the mother of the person who held him at gunpoint, because, as I say, he was also in the Fresco siege. So coincidental.
Well, how does that come out?
Well, he's like, he knew that Linda's brother. Recognise? No, he knew that Linda's brother was the hostage taker. So when he's like, "Hang on a minute, Mike, you're married to Linda. I'm going out with her mum."
I do remember the episode, but I don't remember how it came out. I just imagine them all sitting around, and she's like, "Oh," or Fred's like, "These these tomatoes, I say, these tomatoes are very underripe. And then she says, probably got them from Freshco's. You know, the funny fact about Freshco's is...
Well, however it comes out, Fred can't be doing with this, so he walks out on her, but then he soon backpedals and says, oh, you know what, it's not right to punish you for what your son Dean did. I say it's not right. You're a very handsome woman, Evelyn. I'll give you a shot.
She's a fine woman. She's a fine-looking woman.
So they carry on dating for a bit, Fred and Eve, although Fred's daughter-in-law, by Ashley, Maxine, is very suspicious of her, accusing her of being a gold digger, because, you know, the Sykes have got a little bit of a reputation for being this dodgy council estate lot. Maxine reckons that Eve's a bad mum for abandoning her kids, and this all kind of comes out at another dinner party disaster at Ashley and Maxine's house. Evelyn tells Maxine, I hope you never have kids of your own. So that's a bit hard. Evelyn could be she did definitely have a bit of a, let's say, a rougher side to her.
She's got one of those wasp chewing faces.
She really, really does. Yeah. She's been dragged up on on the streets.
Who's like that
States.
now? Beth is the only one who's got left, really.
Yeah, Beth really. But I think Evelyn had a bit more clout to her.
I don't think anyone would care if Beth had to go in.
Well, no, exactly. So anyway, a few months later, Maxine's having troubles getting pregnant at the time, and once more she finds that she's not managed it.
What do you mean she's not managed?
She's not managed to get pregnant.
She's not managed it. That's a really bad way of putting it.
She's been unsuccessful in her endeavours to be with child.
It's not her fault.
Well, I don't know. She's been playing hide the sausage with Butcher Ashley.
Takes two to make a baby. It's not necessarily her fault.
Anyway, at this point, Eve kind of looks after her and consoles her a little bit. The pair start to thaw out.
And she's like, "Don't worry about it, because they probably come out weird, like mine did."
Probably come out with a squeaky voice if it's Ashley's baby.
They all end up. One of them will get shot.
Anyway, before long, it's Audrey who's accusing Eve of only being after Fred's money, because, as we might remember, Audrey held a bit of a torch for Fred as well. So Fred's starting to grow suspicious of Eve now, because he goes to see her at the Turk's Head pub Wednesday and finds out that she hasn't worked there for 3 weeks. Doesn't confront her about it. Instead, he's like, "Oh, let me drive you into work today." And she's like, "Oh, I suppose so." So she goes into the pub. He hangs around outside for a bit. But then before long, he sees her heading off to a bus stop a couple of minutes later. Next day, Eve admits she's not told him about losing her job because she wanted to prove to him that she wasn't after his money. There you go. So she wanted to... If she'd have said, "Oh, I've lost my job," or whatever, and he might have thought, "Well, you don't care, you want my money," which is, "No, I'm going to find another job, I'm going to work for it." She knew that if she wasn't employed, he'd offer to pay for her, basically.
Oh no, imagine that.
I know. Fancy being a kept woman, Gemma.
Yes, I do.
I don't know, what Freddie Elliott was worth, but I'm going to say he might have been a millionaire.
Yeah, I reckon there's quite a few of them stealth millionaires knocking about.
Yeah, he had a big old house, didn't he, Fred Elliott?
Did he?
Yeah, and he liked his golf, and I can't remember. I think it might have been brought up at one point, but he was pretty loaded.
Was he the mayor?
No, you're thinking of Alf.
No, I know Alf was the mayor, and Alf and Fred are different people, Michael. But why did he take Alf and Audrey to France?
Because it was the black pudding contest.
No, but why was he doing it? Because he's in charge of the something.
He's just in charge of the black puddings.
Wasn't he a business?
He was
like the
he was just
version
a
of
hoi polloi la-di-da.
What are they called? The Masons. He's like
the square dealers.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was very high up in the square dealers.
And they probably got a load of riches.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, Eve tries out to get some other jobs, including one at the Nag's Head pub, but ultimately is unsuccessful. So in order to cheer her up, Fred comes up with a bit of a plan, and he had his heart in the right place, bless him. But he said to Dougie, "Look, can you give Eve a job at the Rovers? I'll pay her with all my oodles of cash." And Dougie's like, "Win-win. So I get a new barmaid that I don't have to pay for, yeah, I will do that. An experienced barmaid at that. So he takes Eve on at the Rovers. And then, just to completely take advantage of Fred, he just keeps throwing all these extra shifts at her. So rather than Fred having to pay, like, you know, for the odd shift there, here and there, Eve is just, like, working all the time at the Rovers. Not coming anywhere near to...
Well, can you imagine being able to afford to just cover someone else's wages?
I know.
No way.
That's how rich he was. He has got the best pies in the West. So he gives Eve... anyway, I've said that already. So
gives her
extra shifts. Yeah. So meanwhile, okay, you're still with us.
Everybody. Yeah, I am.
Linda and Mike going through a messy divorce.
Is Evelyn's daughter.
Thank you for reminding me. So Evelyn says, right, you just make sure that you get what you're owed off of him. Mike also very, very rich. Audrey overhears this.
He drinks his whiskey from a
and he
decanter.
Smokes big cigars. Audrey overhears this and thinks that she's talking about Eve getting Fred's money. So when she tries to tell this to Fred, he's like, no, I'm not having any of it.
I'll say... I'm not having any of it.
He was very, very trusting, wasn't he, Fred? He was a bit of a fool for love, and once he showed an interest in somebody, he went full in, and he was like, no, I won't have a word said against her. So,
that's right.
Yeah, and I mean, all of this was over the years, over the previous 5-6 years or so. There'd been like little sparks of romantic tension between Fred and Audrey, hadn't there? And this is only 2 years after Alf died, so she was maybe ready to move on and
She's like,
take a new man.
When your dog dies, give it an appropriate mourning period and then you get another one.
Exactly. So Linda overhears Fred and Dougie one time talking about who's really paying Eve's wages, tells her mum the truth. Eve is absolutely livid at this. She's like, you're making a mug of me. I thought that I got this job because I was doing a good job, that Dougie wanted me, and now I just find out that he kind of pity employed me. Storms out the Rovers. Fred chases her down the road, and because it's Fred, proposes to her in the middle of the street. Good old Fred and his proposals. She's like a bit taken aback by this, but I mean, as you maybe would do if you proposed to by an oodles of cash haver, she accepts. And Fred's like, I'm arranging a quick wedding. I don't know how many times he proposed to women during his time on the show, but it wasn't often that they said that they accepted. So he wanted to make sure we got that ring on her finger pretty quick. So Dougie, after this point, gives her a proper job at the Rovers as well, because she's actually not half bad a barmaid. And Audrey tells Fred, thank you, if you marry Eve, it's over between us.
What does
we
that
won't be
even
friends
mean?
anymore. I'll never speak to you again.
Go on then.
So, wedding is set for the following week. This is how quickly things move. But if we're thinking like Daisy and Daniel at the moment are getting married fairly quickly, and there's months between it. I'm marrying you in a week. This is Raquel and Curly territory here.
You've got to reduce the amount of opportunity there is for things to go wrong.
I mean, Fred was just desperate. He was absolutely just wanted to get a wife. So they go to this posh country house hotel. Audrey does go along as well, but it's to try and stop them. Thinks the better of it, and there's like, actually, he's my mate. I want him to be happy. I'd better just sneak out there. However, Fred sees her, convinces her to stay. Now, Maxine is spying on this. She sees Fred and Audrey together, and goes and tells Eve, Fred's still got a thing with Audrey. Look, I just saw him with his arm round her just out the back there. And she obviously thinks the worst about this. They have a huge row about it, Eve and Fred do, which Ryan and Jimmy, the sons who've come along to the wedding, also join in with. So there's this massive argy-bargy before the wedding. Fred explains to Eve, look, there is nothing going on between me and Audrey, so the ceremony goes ahead. But Maxine has to be witness because Linda's been packed off into a car by Mike. So this was Linda's last appearance on Corrie, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is funny.
Yeah, so I think during this was very explosive pre-wedding drama. So Mike and Linda, who, as I had been going through a bit of a messy divorce, then they were like thinking, oh, can we get back together again? But then Mike's son Mark reappears on the scene again, who Linda had an affair with, not like the previous year. All gets very, very messy. Mike's like, right, I've had enough of you. Sling your hook. He strong arms her into a car, doesn't he? He slaps her, strong arms her into a car, and she drives off. She doesn't drive off. She's in the car. I can't remember. I thought that she does. I can't remember whether it's him driving her or whether he just bundles her into the car.
Oh, I thought
I don't remember.
Okay, I was confused. I thought you said he put her in the boot.
No, no. But It wasn't even Linda who put into the boot, because that was when Jacqueline Peary who played her. She wasn't available for her final episode.
I'm gone.
So it was a stunt double. But anyway, bye Linda Sykes. So the only Sykes we got left on the programme now is Eve, who is no longer a Sykes. She's an Elliott because the wedding's taken place.
I thought you were going to say she's an alien.
No.
She's no longer a Syke, she's an alien.
So Fred and Eve go on honeymoon in Venice. Lovely.
Oh, great.
So lots of ice cream had there.
Get there soon because it's going to sink.
When they return a month later, Eve is somewhat concerned when she learns that nobody has heard from Linda since the wedding took place. And she starts to think that Mike has offed her. So there's this big old murder mystery story around the end of 2001 where, well, I think we know that Mike didn't kill her, but nobody's got any idea where she
like
is.
This twist.
Police sort of take Mike into the police station because he was witnessed slapping her. Like, things are looking a bit dodgy for him. And then they find Mike's car pulled out of the river, Navan, and they think that maybe Linda's body's going to be inside. So there's actually this really great scene where Fred and Eve are going along to the side of the river, and this car is dredged out of the side of it, and Eve is like, she's beside herself with worry because she thinks she's about to find her daughter's bloated corpse.
Oh,
but
gross.
Pre-watershed, she's not inside, but one of her shoes is.
Oh.
I would call that Lindarella.
Oh, God.
I just came up with that one. I didn't even plan that one. So,
Good one.
Eve is convinced that Mike has killed Linda and sets Jimmy on him.
Jimmy is her brother.
No.
Yeah, Jimmy's one of the kids. Jimmy is...
Oh, yeah, Eve's kids. Not,
yeah, Jimmy is
Sorry, I thought you meant
brother.
Eve's... Yeah.
I know.
Thank you. So, so he's like a hitman, basically. This causes a huge falling out between Eve and Fred, who doesn't really want his friends, intimidated by a gangstery mobster type.
Well,
he obviously
also,
doesn't believe that Mike would kill Linda as well. Not in this world, he would say. Mike hires a private detective then to try and find her, but Eve's like, just covering your tracks, mate. I know you did it. This was a time when Eve maybe wasn't so likeable, but I think it was because, as viewers, we were supposed to be siding with Mike because we know that even though he's a bit of a Cockney white boy, dodgy geezer, he ain't a murderer.
Yeah,
he's no Stephen Reed.
Was this a murder mystery? Were we supposed to go, maybe he did?
I can't remember, but we definitely didn't know where she was. So I suppose there's that.
Because I remember watching this and thinking, this is actually a really great twist. And it would be, I wish I didn't know that she wasn't dead.
Yeah. No, I can't remember at the time because I've only, again, watched it recently with the knowledge of I know she's going to be okay.
They should do that. They should do that again.
Yeah.
Don't you think that'd be interesting? Like a kind of major character just disappears, and then everyone thinks that somebody killed them, and you're like, I don't know. Don't know if they did.
Could be good. Anyway, Jimmy starts to take matters into his own hands then. He arranges a funeral wreath for Mike to be sent to the factory, and he goes in there with a baseball bat after him. And Eve eventually realises this is getting a little bit too out of hand, so stops him because she realises that this could come between her and Fred, and she's got a pretty sweet meal ticket here, and she don't want to get rid of him. So she starts to eventually get fed up with living in Fred's house, his massive Elliott Towers mansion, because it's where he spent many years with his first wife, and he's like, oh, you can redecorate, but
so
Evelyn's like...
his first wife?
I don't know that. Well, she wasn't in the show, but
Okay.
she was gone before the show started. I cannot remember, but it's on Corrie. Anyway, they get he's like, no, she's like, I'd rather move actually. She probably wants to upgrade. They get the decorators in the meantime and move in with Maxine and Ashley for a bit while this decoration's going on, which absolutely drives them mad, especially Eve snoring. And I remember that being quite a funny episode because there's a scene, I think it's Maxine and Ashley downstairs in number 4 one day, and they're talking about the terrible din caused by this raucous snoring in the middle of the night, and they and the viewers of course are led to believe it's Fred that's doing this, but in the end it turns out that the source of the snoring is actually Eve. So anyway, they're still looking for a house to move into themselves, find it a little bit tricky. So when Dougie puts the Rovers up for auction, Fred trumps Peter and Dev by putting in a surprise offer of £76,000 for himself. which ends up winning. So, Fred, new owner of the Rovers. Eve is thrilled because she is now the new landlady. Appreciate it while you can, love. You're going to be probably the shortest one ever. 2002, over to you.
Well, Betty, within weeks of this happening, walks out because she's moaning about how many hours she's got to work. Eve doesn't care, and Fred has to persuade her to come back.
Again.
Fred gets the sign put over the door with Eve's name on it for the licensee, but the name is that gets put up as Betty's by accident.
Yeah,
so Eve's furious about that.
There's a sign painter that comes into the Rovers and he talks to Gina, I'm gonna say, and it's like, hey, who's in charge around here, or something, and they kind of make a joke to say, oh, Betty's been here for ages.
She's in charge.
So they put up
and the sign,
Elizabeth Williams.
The painter's like, I'm not going to check.
Not going to check that, yeah.
Right.
So Eve's furious about this, and there is a bit of a thing between Eve and Betty for the first half of 2002, or the first part of it.
Well, Eve is like, right, this is my domain. I'm the landlady. I'm in charge. She stops Fred from selling his pies in the Rovers, and she also stops him from mass producing Betty's hot pot to sell in shops.
See, I quite liked how she just kind of strode in there, rolled up her sleeves, and was like, right. She had a bit of clout to her.
I know, but why does she do these things? Because they both seem like bad business ideas.
What?
Well, like, you can't sell your pies in the Rovers. Why?
I think she just wants to Fred is the owner, but she's the manager, and she doesn't want to feel like he's having any say in what's going on.
I can understand that's her real reason, but you can't just make decisions because you're a petty cow.
Well, she did quite fine from it.
And why does she not want to get money from Betty's hot pot in the shops?
Well, I think Betty didn't like the idea, so Eve just puts a stop to it. And they want it to be Rovers exclusive. People won't be coming to the Rovers for a lovely Betty's hot pot if you can just go down Fresco's and buy one, can you?
Well, you just better get them in co-op, and it didn't hurt the business, did it? For tax reasons, Fred tells Eve he's going to sign the Rovers over to her.
And so he signs his own death warrant nearly.
Whoopsie doozies. Middle of April, we see Eve's getting a mysterious phone call, which she says is from the brewery. But Fred gets very suspicious because she says, "Oh, I've got to go somewhere this weekend, so I can't have dinner with you and the peacocks." Yeah,
so we noticed we kind of skipped to mid-April already at this point, and unfortunately for Eve, the writing was on the wall once we got to the early 2002. And although she appeared in quite a few episodes, it was very much, well, she's the landlady of the Rovers, of course she's going to be making lots of appearances kind of thing. And she didn't really have many stories. She was there in a supporting role, and like I said, I think she had the makings of what could have been quite a solid landlady, but didn't have the chance. So anyway, Eve's got mysterious business to be getting on with.
Fred follows her, and it turns out she's meeting up with her ex-husband Ray, who reveals that Linda, their daughter, has been in touch with him, and she's alive, and she's living in Dublin. So she's not dead.
No, she's not dead. She's alive.
Unless the dead and the living can coexist.
No,
only in
she's
Dublin.
definitely alive.
There needs to be a secret, though. Not sure why, but don't tell anybody. Fred sees her leaving Ray's house and gets the idea about they're back together.
I think maybe they just kind of like the idea. She doesn't want to have anything to do with Mike. She doesn't want Mike getting in touch with her to say, "Oh, you got to tell everyone that I didn't kill you." I think, and they like the idea that Mike's maybe still under suspicion for his wife's disappearance.
If you're Linda. So the next day, Fred goes to see Ray himself. He doesn't tell her about Linda, but he does reveal that Ray,
yes,
and Eve never actually got divorced from when they were married the first time. Fred's like, "Oh my god," that's what it's like. "Oh my god," exactly in that accent. "Oh my god, I can't believe it." He confronts Eve about it the next day, and she says, "Oh yeah, that reminds me. I did start divorcing him."
She tries to deny it,
but I never got around to finishing it. It was one of those things.
He goes around there, and she admits that yeah, Linda's alive and everything, and I don't want to tell you.
Linda's alive.
But and then he's like, "Is there anything else?" And she's like, "No, Fred, I swear, there's nothing else." And this is when he's like,
"Guess
That's
what?
not true, actually, is it?"
Guess what?
Yeah. Is it true that you're still married to that Ray?
Just
to own up to it, just to fess up.
Only legally.
they have this massive row. It's a really great scene between the two of them where she shows her true colours, really. Her true inner Sykes comes out. And even though she could be fairly pleasant, especially when things were going her way, she kind of really flipped, and the very worst of Eve came out in that last scene.
So they have this blazing row. She tells him some home truths about putting up with him for all this time, and perhaps that was a bad move.
It's sad because Fred is such a lovely guy, isn't he?
He's a big softie. He is one of these people that you really want to find happiness.
Yeah, and that works so well for his character because he was such a hopeless romantic, and you were really rooting for him to find the right person. And I don't remember what I thought at the time about whether I thought it would be a good idea for him to go out with Eve. I think probably not. But I wanted him to get somebody, and it's just absolutely gutting for him to realise that this person that he committed to, that, you know, he pledged to be with for the rest of his life, is just another young scoundrel.
Right.
Sorry, that end of my sentence that I'm passing back over to you.
Right, so Maxine persuades Fred to meet up with Eve so they can talk things through. He does, but he says, look, this is over. We weren't even legally married. And she says, well, fine, I'm going to keep the Rovers because it's actually mine now.
Yeah, because he signed it over to her, remember?
So Fred's like, no, I want it back, actually. I'm going to find out a way of getting you in trouble for being a bigamist if you don't give it back to me. So she reluctantly agrees.
Yeah, he says he's going to report her to the police.
And leaves Weatherfield. And Fred's like, oh.
and so endeth
the end.
The story of Eve Sykes Elliott. Nay, something else. I don't know what. And that is literally it. So really kind of fleeting trip to Weatherfield. Definitely not one for the history books, I would say. But I would also say that, you know, over the past 6 months or so that we've seen her story play out on ITV3, I've found a newfound appreciation of her. And it's sometimes glad. It's nice to do that, isn't it? Because you have a character in your head and you think they were a bit rubbish, and then you go back and watch it. It's like, oh, they weren't so bad. And I'm not saying that she was anywhere near an all-time classic or anything, but I always like to, you know, think positively about these characters. And I thought she was a great actress as well. So the writing really was on the wall for her, though, once Kieran Roberts became producer of Coronation Street in December 2001. Now, he eventually rose to the ranks of executive producer. He just left a few years ago, didn't he? Mm-hmm. But he was just made producer role in December 2001. Viewership had been on the decline, and it was decided by him, look, you need to change tack here. They'd been ramping up the issues storylines in recent years, like, you know, Sarah Louise's pregnancy had been, you know, the biggest one. But he's like, no, going to move away from that. We're going to have more comedy, fewer issue-led stories, no more Toya getting raped in a ginnel. These were all things that Jane McNaught, the previous producer, had thought these were great for ratings. And he was like, no, let's leave those to EastEnders. And so he began to swing the producer's axe. So he said, we're getting rid of Eve. We're getting rid of Dougie Ferguson. Getting rid of Bobby Lewis. Getting rid of Molly Hardcastle. Getting rid of Sam Kingston. We're getting rid of Matt and Charlie Ramsden. And to be fair, looking at that axe list there, he wasn't wrong, was he, with his picks?
No.
I'm going to say the biggest loss out of all of those was probably Dougie Ferguson.
Yeah, Dougie.
He had possibly the makings of a classic character, but, you know, he also had the best exit out of all of these. Bobby Lewis, a factory girl who went out with Vic. Dull. Yeah, exactly. Who does?
Molly Hardcastle was a nurse.
Yeah, she was the nurse that Kevin went out with for a bit. She had drinking problems, but didn't have much going for her.
And Sam was the masked python.
The masked python that
He's
had
actually
always a worried...
just a morose, sad-faced boy, wasn't he? He's actually quite funny. But I don't know if he was if it's supposed to be funny. I don't know.
No, he was just like Mr. Worry, basically. And the Ramsdens, well, you know, they're the butt of every joke, aren't they? So, you know, say what you like.
They were.
This is what producers need to do, isn't it? And it used to be a lot more of a thing. I mean, Brian Parker had done it on Coronation Street 4 years previously, 4 or 5 years ago. Come in, get rid of the dead wood. And for the last couple of Coronation Street producers that have come in these days, there's always the rumours. It's like, oh, you know, Stuart Blackburn's in. Who's he going to axe? Who's Kate Oates going to axe? Who's Ian McLeod going to axe? And generally the answer to that is, oh, no one. We don't do these big soap axings anymore. But, you know, the cast is huge. And this kind of goes to show maybe they should. There was Deadwood then. He got rid of them. sorry to say that Eve was Deadwood. I've said I think she's got potential, but he got rid of a lot of characters that are not going down in the Corrie history books. And now the rumours started circulating about this the following month in January 2002, and The Guardian ran an article about Corrie deciding to stop these sensational stories, go back to gentler character-based stuff. And a source said, there's a lot of thinking going on about which characters should stay in and which are going nowhere. And Melanie Kilburn, Eve, was rumoured to be facing the axe, but according to the Mail at the time, ITV had done a survey to find out which characters were popular.
Oh my
God.
God.
This is kind of what they used to say, well, who's going to stay and who's going to go. So the Duckworths and the Croppers came out on top of that. They were the cream of the crop. And I'm guessing maybe, Bobby, Molly, Sam, and ultimately Eve were at the bottom. So there was like, how terrifying would that be?
Yeah, definitely. And it's not the actor's fault.
No, not always. Not always.
No, I don't think it. Nobody goes, "Oh, this is a great part. I'm going to ruin it."
No. So it was. It was worrying times if you were a bit of a naff character.
Has there ever been a character on Coronation Street who's an excellent, amazing character, but was acted so badly that they became unpopular? No.
I don't. Not off the top of my head. Write in and let us know. So that a couple of days later, on the 13th of January, the People ran an article about who was in and who was out.
See, this is why they should do this now, because the drama around and the intrigue is surely going to drive up.
There's really not very many stories about this person's been axed. Generally, when characters leave, we kind of told.
They haven't renewed their contract.
No, they've not renewed their contract, or they've decided to leave. It's not very often.
You hear now.
People are axed.
Yeah, they are,
aren't they? Like I think Robert Prester. I think that Tristan was axed after Michelle left.
What does that
But they
really
don't make
mean?
a big thing of it.
I know they should. I mean, it's not.
It's harsh and it's horrible, and
it's horrible.
I'd hate to be in their position and just when a new producer comes in, especially if you've been there at the time when the axes swung.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's not fair, but it's part of the showbiz, intrigue and drumming up excitement for your show. And at the moment, the only way Corrie really does that is with leaking storylines.
Yeah, this is what's happening next week. So in this People article, it was saying who's going and who's staying. Interestingly, Melanie Kilburn in this was written down as being absolutely, definitely not axed, because there were rumours that Jimmy Harkishin would be leaving.
No!
Or that he'd been cut. There are rumours that Sue Cleaver had been cut. And they're like, no way, we're not losing Dev, not losing Eileen, we are absolutely not losing Eve. Well, less than a month later, on the 11th of February, exit was announced, and it was said that this is going to tie into the story about what happened to Linda, so we get some kind of closure on that. Apparently, it was said it was not related to the axing rumours the previous month, but I think kind of the agreed upon turns of events now is that it kind of was, and it was Kieran Roberts saying, sorry Eve, you're going. So that was it. And on her exit, Melanie Kilburn said, the character of Eve came in for one episode originally. Over a year later, Eve has married Fred and became what she most wanted, the landlady of the Rovers. As for myself, Corrie has always been a legend. I've thoroughly enjoyed being part of that, and I wish it and everyone in the programme great success in the future. Kieran Roberts, producer, said, Melanie is an extremely talented actress, and Eve has been a great character over the past year as the landlady of the Rovers, Fred's wife, and the matriarch of the Sykes clan. So there we go. That was the end of Eve on Cobbles. Could come back, but I'm thinking that there's probably nothing there that's tying her.
There's literally no reason why she would ever come back.
She ain't dead.
Just
imagine if she came back and then looked at Damon and was like, bloody hell, blast from the past, you're my dead son. You beefed up a bit. So after Corrie, Melanie went in, and she had loads of TV stuff to do. She was in the Bill. She was PCSO Laura Bryant in the Bill for a little bit.
What's a PCSO?
Community Support Officer. Oh. I think that she might have graduated and become a proper copper as well, though. She was also, she had a one-off appearance in Shameless. She was in Line of Duty for an episode. Casualty Doctors, same kind of stuff as you often get to hear about. And yeah, she's been in 10 episodes of EastEnders as well, playing Reverend Eileen Mills.
Irene
Mills, thank you, who last appeared just last December. So she's definitely still going.
She's definitely around.
Yeah. So that's it, really. I did think that watching it back on ITV3 recently, there was a real massive character change for her just in those final episodes. It came as a bit of an unexpected and quick twist that she was leaving, because in the new year of 2002, everything was looking very, very rosy for her, and it felt like there wasn't any kind of inkling that the writing was on the wall. Of course,
are you talking about the character or the actress?
Yeah, the character. But I suppose if it was only decided in December the previous year that she was going, I guess they were setting her up to be the landlady of the Rovers in New Year of 2002. And it just goes to show how quickly these things can turn around, can't they?
It's weird.
It's bloodthirsty.
It's weird to me that they know so far in advance what they're going to do with stories, but sometimes they still just come really abruptly.
Yeah, and this one felt very abrupt. Yes, it's good that we got some kind of closure on the Linda mysterious disappearance story, but to have a bright new future ahead of her, getting a bit of a conflict with Betty, being a pretty good landlady, showing Gina and Shelley who's boss behind the bar, to just like, oh, I got a mysterious phone call. Oh, I'm still married. And now I'm going to, let my inner fishwife come out and give you out both barrels, Fred. So it was a bit of a sad end with the character, but, them's the breaks, kid. So, was she actually a gold digger? I don't know. I think if you're from... If you're from a gangster family and you're a bit hard and you don't know where your next meal's coming from some of the times, and you're used to members of your family being engaged in criminal activities, it definitely seems, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that you'd be marrying this very rich guy to get your hands on his cash. But
well, look, I don't like the phrase gold digger. Is so sexist. It really annoys me, because society, especially for people like her in the past, didn't give very many opportunities, especially for women who had lots of kids, for them to make their own gold. Take away a group of people's advantages and not advantages, what's the word, possibilities. Take those away, and then condemn them if they try to marry somebody who is in a group of people that have all the advantages.
I honestly,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I did kind of.
How was she supposed to have made her fortune living in a council estate with 5 kids and a husband in and out of prison?
Rewatching it, I didn't get the impression she was only after Fred for his money. I do think she was definitely really fond of him. The proposal came very quick, and maybe the yes that she said could have been thought out a little bit harder. But I think that she did love him, which is why when she told him those home truths in her final stint of episodes and just completely tore him to shreds, I thought, that's a bit of a character personality change just to facilitate your exit, isn't it? And the whole surprise bigamy, was that ever planned? You wonder about things like that sometimes, don't you? Here's a secret from your past. It's always been planned. There. We've already. Didn't feel like it.
There are so many things in Corrie where, especially if you get a new character come in or something, they deliberately don't fill out loads of their backstory because then anything goes.
Yeah. I mean, we've had some other examples of ridiculous backstoried bigamy, and just recently, haven't we? Like Beth, when it turned out that she was still married to Craig's dad, Daryl. That was a bit odd, how that was just like, she's always known that she was married.
It happens weirdly often.
And Tim just recently as well. I'd forgotten about that one, but he got married in Vegas, didn't he? To that woman Charlie. Thought it didn't count. So he kind of always knew that he was married, and I just don't like it, because although it's one of these technically not a retcon things because we never saw them get married then. It's like, no, it doesn't feel right. If bigamy is to work as a storyline, really, it needs to be planned and you need to see it through. So, Peter Barlow with Shelley and Lucy was Corrie's best example of a bigamy story, isn't it? Because we literally saw him getting married, stringing these two women along, ducking out of Shelley's sister's funeral so that he could go and marry Lucy. It was a gritty, grubby and kind of mucky, but great storyline and believable.
That's believable, and you can see what's happened. Whereas a lot of these other ones are just like, oh, that happened before.
Yeah, just trust us. Maya Sharma was another one as well, wasn't she? Mad Maya, because she went marrying a load of people. She pretended to be Sunita.
Yeah.
And set her up as a bigamist, but it kind of came a bit in the
immigration.
bum. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, Corrie's, I think, original bigamy storyline, I don't know whether there's any before this. I can't remember, not off the top of my head. I can't remember. It was Arnold Swain when he married Emily Bishop, and I think that felt like it was always set up to be a bigamy story, wasn't it? Because it kind of he met and married her over the course of a year or so. So it felt like that they always wanted it to go that way. And I think if you're going to do a bigamy storyline, do that. But I'm gonna say I don't need to see any more bigamy storylines at the moment. You could say this about so many other outrageous situations that the Weatherfield residents get themselves into, but it's not really something that you hear about happening very much.
I just find it weird that you can... there's obviously no place where there's like a list of all the people who are married.
And they just have to check it off.
You'd think that if it was... Like, it is a crime... So you'd think that there would be a way of checking, but it's just like, we'll trust you. I'm sure you haven't been married. You're not still married, are you?
Well, they do that. Does anybody have any reason why these two should not be legally wed? And that's their get out clause. Well, nobody objected.
We did ask you. Well, apparently in the UK, across the whole year, last year, there were 58 crimes of bigamy. And then the year before that... 55, the year before that 86.
So it does go on then. But I'm going to say still in Weatherfield this feels like quite a high number.
That's only people that get caught and prosecuted.
That's true, because I mean if they're like Eve, they get away with it.
Apparently you can just get married lots of times and nobody's that bothered about it. Which goes to show you how much of a sham it is, doesn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, don't just change characters' histories and say they were married, Corrie. It doesn't sit right with me, really. It doesn't. I
can see why it's tempting, because it's like, there you go, that's dramatic, isn't it? That's something dramatic that we can say that she's done wrong.
Yeah. Are we going to find out soon that Jenny was still married to
why not?
To Mr. Midgley and
Daisy was married.
Yeah. Don't like it. Anyway, that's Eve. So bit of a short one. We still managed to drag it out for 50 minutes or so with a little bit of
help from my friends.
Off-topic talk. But, we've been doing this podcast for coming up on 11 years, and there's only so many characters left that we haven't profiled. But we definitely managed to make her character profile last comfortably longer than Fred's, and doesn't really sit right with me, but what can you do?
Well, I want people to write in and let me know. Do you want a character profile for Steve Fisher? Because I would love to do him.
Would you?
He's one of my favourite characters from Old Corrie.
I think... I've got my list. I've got my list of characters. I mean, all those characters...
Who were those horrible couple?
Dickie and Algie Fleming.
Yeah, the Flemings.
If the podcast's still going in 10 years, we'll have scraped the bottom of that barrel for sure. I mean, looking at all those characters that Kieran Roberts acts, we haven't done a profile of Sam Kingston. Nope. We haven't done Molly. We haven't done the Ramsdens. We could be doing all of them soon, to be honest, because there aren't many left that we haven't done, the big names. But, that's our problem, not yours. And I think maybe we should... We've got revisits, haven't we? And,
we've got some that really need to be done again.
It feels like some of the classic characters.
Didn't we do the Ogdens as one?
Yeah, but
I think you were saying, No,
they're fairly inseparable. But, I mean, Fred we should probably do again. But I don't know. If anyone else has got any other requests of characters that they'd like to to profile, then... Check on our blog first to make sure that we haven't done them, conversationstreet.podbean.co.uk, because a lot of them are on YouTube, although not all of them are. And if their name's not on there and you think that we could waffle on for nigh on an hour about it, then give us a try.
Yeah.
That's it, everybody. We're done. Thank you for listening. If you stay to the end, good on you. And we'll be back at the weekend with more Coronation Street things to talk about. But until then, goodbye from me, goodbye from Gemma, goodbye, say goodbye.
I said goodbye.
I'll say it properly. Say it nicely.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.